everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get Out of Rap. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Ed Creasey, who is Vice President of Solution Engineering for Calabrio. Um, Ed, very well-known figure in the industry, who I'm very lucky over the last few years doing this research that we're going to talk about. I've got to know, fellow Tottenham fan, but we are definitely not
No,
going there at the moment.
not
But
going
Ed,
there. No,
Ed,
it's too traumatic.
Ed, welcome and thank you for
Right.
doing this.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. We have weird serendipity, don't we? Tottenham being one that isn't good luck, but live quite near to each other and share sort of very similar sort of career paths, and that's why I love talking about this research because we're at a very strange and exciting tipping point. I think exciting is the right word, actually. I've never been more excited about, the platform this research tells us about. So yeah, very happy to be here.
You're dead right. That serendipity, of course, includes we both started as agents. So we are here to talk about voice of the agent research that we've worked together on. It's the second year we've done it. Why is doing something like this important to you and Calabrio? Voice of the agent. Why focus there?
Uh, Confirmation bias, obviously, because um, I think if you get it right for agents, you get it right for customers. And we unlocked a lot of senior level attention in this area with the pandemic. Suddenly, when we were the only front of house, and yeah, and it's not just because I was one. I think it's because I've spent 20 years analyzing customer experiences and hearing those beautiful moments when agents just get it so right, but also seeing there was one call I was analyzing, and you could hear the agent sighing. The customer was on hold, and you could hear how frustrated the agent was. It was just system latency. We've all been there, right? Multiple systems, and and then it's thinking, you can do something about that and raise awareness of the barriers that agents face in their daily life. And obviously, selling software that helps it is great as well. So I think there's two sides of it. One is I really believe if you don't get it right for your agents, you're never going to deliver a great customer experience. Um, the other is AI, right? There's a big change coming, and it's exciting to see where our industry is just before it. So yeah, there's lots of reasons to be excited.
You're dead right. I mean, I think that word excitement, we've been in the industry a while. There doesn't, I can't remember a period where change is so across the board, it's so comprehensive, but it's also progressing at a startling rate.
Hmm.
And why I think this research is so important is, like you say, if we do not bring the customer facing colleagues into that equation, we don't hear where they're at, what they think about the industry, that we all have to be aligned on this. It has to be customers, technology, and our operational teams. So something as comprehensive as this, I think, is really important for operational leaders to read and to understand and see how that stands up against maybe some of their internal research as well.
And I think there's a provocation in this research actually, which I'm sure we'll explore today, and that is there is a difference of opinion between operational leaders and frontline agents. And I'm not assuming one side is right or the other side is right, but it's intriguing. And
Mm,
I think going forward, your community, and I'm going to do it with my customers, I'm going to explore this and pull on
mm,
these threads and saying, well, you know, and my bias is probably to think there's truth in both, which is when and I put myself in the shoes of an operational leader because every day I work on Calabrio, and I'm using tools operational leaders use when I'm working with customers. So I think I'm very much in their mindset, but I always tune back to those days when I was frontline agent, and you know how your view of the world is different to someone not taking 50 interactions a day.
mm.
And particularly now, because we're seeing these simple contacts reducing, or certainly all the predictions are that way. my time as a complaints manager, and just taking every conversation was complex, and that's a very different mindset. And having that segue from being like relentless frontline, to complex, longer handle time, more empathy needed, is definitely somewhere where we are, I think.
Well, you've had a taster of what we're predicting most agents will be dealing with day to day. So, that's fascinating. Um, let's just talk some basics. What kind of
Yeah.
numbers and how, when was the research done?
Yep. So numbers are 540 agents split between US and UK, about 60-40. And so it was done Q3 2025, so it's very recent. Stats wise, it's sort of not surprising demographically, and I will always caveat demographics, particularly as a middle-aged man talking about demographics. What do I know? Nothing. But demographics are generalizations, but they give us some guidance about the cohort. So you've mainly got Gen Z and millennials split about 40% each, and then you've got a few of you and me out there. Gen Xers are hanging on in there in the marketplace, and there's not many baby boomers. So, but the particular trend in the was tenure. So we asked two questions: how long have you been in the industry, and how long have you been with your current organization? And there's this interesting cohort of 34%. So think of, when you look at this data, a third of the data is people who have been in the industry less than 2 years. And it's more pronounced when you look at the tenure with their current organization, and it's 55% have been with their organization less than 2 years. So there is a lens that you and I have been talking a lot about, which is what happens when people are fresh to the industry and fresh to their roles, and how people assimilate. I think that's a really interesting part of this research.
Mm, yeah, and that it's interesting, isn't it? Because if I always felt like when leading teams, you had that initial period where we focused on making sure that there was a nice soft landing and then take off into um, BAU. But then I always felt like 2 years was the critical point. At 2 years, these are going to be people who will be the spine of our team
Yeah,
and or will branch off and be superstars in other areas of the business, or we'll lose them.
yeah,
Now, so that's the makeup of the population, which I think anyone listening or watching will say, well, that reflects what I look at every day in my contact center. What what were some of the what was the sort of standouts for you from the research? Because we asked them everything about every aspect of their
yeah,
working life, right?
yeah. And I think it's interesting that the standouts were different to last year, but I'm going to
Mm,
just mention one standout from last year because I want to start on a happy note, and I know that you have an angle on this, which I love. We were gobsmacked, I think, to say, when we saw the Pride and Belief and the sort of almost like a net promoter score for the industry, recommending the job to their friend, and agent satisfaction. That was all between like 68 and 75%. So that was such a foundation, and that has stayed the same, slightly increased, but not statistically significantly. But generally, we've got a workforce who are proud, who would recommend the career, who are satisfied, and that to me is an amazing foundation at a time of change.
I love it. It was so pleasing to see it again, and like you say, nudged slightly up, but
Yeah,
nonetheless, those numbers give me a shiver up the spine because what we're saying is we have a wonderful opportunity to do something magical with a population of people who now are proud to be in this industry because you know let's go back to when we were manning the phones.
yeah,
I'm not sure I would have said that
yeah,
about the industry. My peers, the people I was around day to day, loved working with them, proud to be part of that team. But if our question was specifically around, are you proud to work in this industry? And to see a number that high, I think is just, yeah, it's great.
yeah, yeah. I think it's I think it's a moment for leaders, and I know, that's for, who are watching this, to think, wow, I'm in a position with the majority of my team are in a good place to do something. And that's
Mm.
great because I remember when I was an operational leader in a contact center, the same problem as you and I felt as agents, and we we renamed our careers to, I think you were in financial services and I was
Yeah.
in telecommunications, but and when I was a manager, I felt the same thing. There was a lot of people who weren't there for a career, and that was really hard to create the sort of customer experience you wanted. Another standout there's a few, so I'm gonna try and go through them and not forget some. The second one that linked closely to careers was around career planning, and what we had a third of the agents who were unsure about a long-term career, 43% who didn't know career pathways, 53% who didn't have a progression plan. And when we asked about, well, what roles would you be interested in, it was very traditional. It was team leader, it was trainer, coach, it was QA. And I think that's what the first action point for
Mm.
your community is going, okay, we've got a large sample size with half of the agents not having a plan, and the plan being very traditional at a time of massive technology change. And I think that's an area where the data shows we can improve.
Couldn't agree more. And straight away, it's a relatively simple action is to communicate and spend the time to expose your customer facing colleagues to what is possible. And like you said, the fact that people were saying I could be a team leader, I could be a contact center manager is quite linear.
Yeah,
And we know that the breadth of opportunities and roles is there for all to see, but we've got to show them.
yeah.
We've got to do it as early as possible, as regularly as possible, and not be concerned that we might be losing talent. We're going to be keeping it.
Absolutely, and I'm always cautious. Now I'm in my dotage to talk about back in the day, right? But the benefit of of veterans like you and I is we might have seen technology being introduced and the impact of it, and there's correlations, right? So I'll tell you really, and when it comes to job roles, I remember a job role just evolving in the contact center. And that was when the early days of trying to sell, it was mainly voice back in the day. So it was speech analytics. And I was working at a great vendor called Nexidia. And and we had a very clear view of what it took to analyze conversations. And then when customers started buying into the technology, they said, well, how do we do it ourselves? And we created job roles. And I remember writing
Mm.
job roles. I've still got it, and I'd share it with the customer and say, and they say, who do we look for? And I had a role of, I actually had a who not to look for. But let's talk about the who to look for. And one was the go to your QA team and look for that quality person who, yeah, really understands the structure of a conversation, because that's what quality is all about.
Mm.
The definition of a great customer experience and how you measure that from a behavior and process, right? You had to have that, but you also had someone who was analytical, who had an instinct, and that was the person who would be always in Excel and trying to run trends and all that stuff. They were a great role model. Oh, it was the team leader who was analytical, loved coaching, and we created these principles, right? I think we're at an exact same point with AI. I think there's going to be a whole set of roles that came a role, the speech analyst role, and that as more and more of that software was sold, those roles started appearing in every contact center. And I think we are seeing that with generative AI. I've got customers who are realizing that using Gen AI, although it's much faster and has less bias than previous AI and is incredibly scalable, blah, 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 it's different. You design it in a different way, right? And so I think there's going to be new careers. And just to finish the example, what I always said, please do not give me someone who just uses SQL to write code, who's never been near a conversation. And there is a truth still in that, which is if you give with Gen AI, if you give Gen AI to people who have never been near an operation, I think that's quite dangerous, because they're going to make all sorts of assumptions
Mm.
about what the content of a conversation, whatever channel it is, and they may have the AI skill set, but they've got to understand how conversations work as well.
Yes, very true. I think
Yeah.
we've all been in situations where you can tell whatever the guidance is, or maybe how things are set up, that they don't know customers. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'll give you a real example, right? With AI, you can measure really, really easily things like are certain recording compliance statements said. So it's not a sexy AI example, but it's interesting from how conversations work. So on an inbound call, you don't have to say it because it's said in the IVR. But on an outbound call, the customer doesn't hear it, so you need to say it. So you have a situation where AI is really good at measuring whether the agent says it. It's quite an old use case, but the point it remains the same. Except when you do often at outbound, you might be calling another department, or you might be calling one of your suppliers, and then you don't need to say it at all because it's not a customer. And those are the weird, boring but important rules that you need
mm.
to understand. So, but we should move along from that
Well,
hobby horse. But those roles. What I would say to the community is, AI is disruptive. What you finally got: senior leadership understanding that the contact center is a great place to prototype AI. That's why the progression has been so fast, because you've got all the bits and pieces you need. You've got knowledge bases. You've got bots. Yeah, and you've got chatbots that have been bloody awful for a long time, and Gen AI is making them a lot better. You've got transcripts. You've got digital um, communication. You've got historical data and contracts and shifts with workforce management, right? You've got all this stuff. It's the perfect like crucible for AI. And then and that's why I think your community have got to be ready for that.
well, everyone is talking about AI. We've just come away from the expo,
Yeah.
obviously very prevalent there. Anyone, every conversation includes it. But what do the agents think of it?
Um, Last year it was the sort of negative standout, wasn't it? It was like I think it was 56% of agents didn't find it useful. So this year we thought, and that was a stunning stat, but we thought we should dig a bit deeper. So this time we asked more questions, and what we found was 35% didn't know which tools use AI in their contact center, and 55% were worried that it could replace their jobs, which was the negative side, and certainly the second stat, not massively surprising, I guess. And that did vary across the generations.
Mm,
With Actually, Gen Z were the most anxious, and that makes sense because they're going to have longer in the industry and probably more risk there. But we saw something that balanced against it, which was 48% were actually wanted more AI tools, and 60% of millennials and Gen Zs were using Gen AI either in work or out of work. So we came up with a conclusion that the enablement of AI, and as a vendor, I know that very much. I'm suddenly seeing an exponential rise in the amount of projects I'm doing, which is great. But everyone's trying it. I'll give you a stat that is a massive standout from. It was actually from last year's State of the Contact Center, but we suddenly went when I was for years, and I started doing AI, the early versions of AI in 2007, for probably 15 years, and I had a favorite industry analyst who shall remain nameless, but he asked a good question every time I did a speech. He went, "Okay, Ed, how many customers are using this?" And I had to painfully sort of say, "Well, it's 10 to 20%." Suddenly we've gone up to like 80%.
mm.
And that so everyone is enabling AI, but education has been outpaced. That's what the data is showing. And we think the next phase of transformation, along with these new roles that we talked about, isn't going to be about the deployment. It's going to be about demystifying AI and thinking more, okay, how do we train agents to get more out of it? And then secondly, how can team managers use it? And I've got lots of examples of that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it kind of showed there might be things that are happening that are purposefully designed to help improve the life of an agent, but as it's not being explained to them or communicated, there is this lack of awareness of where AI might sit in their structure, in what's coming. And it's the same as any kind of fear. The more you understand it, the more you explain it and kind of delve into it, the less fearful it becomes. And you might actually start to see opportunity. as opposed to, oh well, this is a fait complete. It's like, well,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to be here for long. So when and with that in mind, and we've mentioned as well about kind of career pathways, the kind of their agents' views on their structure and their management. Where does that kind of what was some of the standouts there?
I love this narrative here because what the narrative tells you as a manager is you've got the tools today to make a difference. And you are making a difference in many ways. So we've got lots of good stats I'm going to share with you now, but there's also some gaps, which is but a lot of them are really easy to fix, underneath it is this constant sort of I don't know if it's a metaphor or something. I don't know what it is, but what it is there's some picture I've got in my head, which is the foundations are really strong. So let's start with the factors motivating agents to choose a career.
Mm,
Um, there were five. We'll come back when I do the bottom three because the top one was remote work opportunities. I know you've got a really good point on that one. Second one was steady income, which is not much operational leaders can do about. The next three were supportive team environment was 47%, opportunities for skill development was 45, and potential for career advancement was 41. And those three together are all things
yeah,
that an operational leader can do something about.
yeah. I I found this area fascinating, and that the first one did surprise me actually that that was the opportunity to work from home,
Yeah,
remote work, and certainly in the conversations I'm having, I don't have any stats for this, but conversations I'm having, what I'm seeing within both Get Out a Rap and the team leader community is there's a shift back.
yeah,
The you may have been working from home 4 days a week, now it's two. And there's this kind of let's return to the office. And thankfully, most organizations are thinking, we've got to make it for a reason other than, well, we've got this building. There's got to be benefits. What I think this indicates though is it's interesting to think about, were those people that were attracted to the opportunity to work remote, will we lose them because they don't have um, access to a contact center nearby, and they never would have joined our industry? Even way before the pandemic, on this podcast, I spoke to a company that would do it specifically do had remote workers because they said we can go to the Outer Hebrides. We can pick up people that otherwise wouldn't have got into our industry. And you do look at that stat and think, oh, I wonder if it continues that way, that we're going to say, well, actually, remote work will reverberate back to pre-pandemic kind of stats. Are we losing? Because I think as well, we also had it added to the diversification within our industry.
yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
it made us more inclusive. And you do think, well, okay, well, what does this mean?
Yeah, and I see a massive upside as someone who runs a global team.
Mm,
Is when my team are all over the world and we've been able to function and thrive like that. I also see the other side of it
yeah,
is I miss face to face.
yeah,
But from a talent perspective, I have a very niche thing I'm trying to hire, which is often a specific language, a specific skill being solutions engineering, and then contact center, and for our world, workforce management or conversation intelligence. And I think the pool shrinks as you look at
mm,
that, and the ability to work hybrid or remote makes a complete difference for me. But then I see the other side of it, which is immensely hard to get people together. And one of the big trends we saw was a difference of opinion between agents and managers. And I think that's worth exploring.
mm,
I can't forget scheduling, but maybe we finish on scheduling because we love that at Calabrio. But there was the big mover was pay rises, right? And we kind of know
Mm,
economically it's tough times at the moment. Last year we had 79% of agents that had a pay rise. This year 52%. That's a massive change.
mm,
And the things motivating agents for leaving, pay and benefits was top, but stressful workload was very close to that. Set against that, 59% of agents said supportive leadership ranks as highly as fair pay for creating happiness. So that's why we said at the start we got this great foundation. And we'll come back to scheduling, but we did see some things in scheduling which prove some good
sure.
foundations. A lot of 70% on things like fairness of schedule.
Mm,
But there was a couple of contradictions. Let's start with empathy. So as we said earlier, 34% new to the industry, 58% of agents are saying customer expectations have stayed the same. And when we asked leaders in the survey earlier this year, 71% saying conversations are becoming more difficult. Got a couple of theories here. One being, are we normalizing stress in the agent community? The other being, are leaders just seeing a different view of the world? And we need
mm,
to bring these together. I don't know. I'm feeling a bit more of the latter one
mm.
as we get on, but it's a really interesting set of data.
Yeah, that is fascinating because is it because if I'm an agent, my lived experience is based on my interactions with my customers, and I'm doing it day to day. How can I determine whether there's been a distinct shift in how
Yeah,
customers are showing up, and our leaders, is their opinion based on uh, data, whether that's customer satisfaction, complaints,
yeah,
data that indicates whether customers' patience is improving or remaining the same, or getting worse. Um, it's been a very challenging time, I think, for leaders around, whether they're able to give pay rises or not, and things like that, and the impact that has on agents is significant,
yeah,
which means that that kind of supportive element is even more important. The fact that having a supportive manager is equal to your pay, kind of, it just is evidence of something we hear all the time, isn't it? There's a lot of cliches around, you don't leave a company, you leave a manager.
yeah.
The importance of managers then is never been more important. But just on that point around, are we normalizing stress, especially with where we think we're heading, which is what you mentioned earlier around less transactional, more complex? Is that a kind of red flag in the data then to say,
Yeah.
let's really think about what agents are dealing with and how we are supporting or alleviating or preventing stress?
I think so, and as you know, I have a bit of bias when it comes to empathy because I spent
We've had some interesting conversations on
yeah,
this. Yeah.
I spent 7 years measuring empathy before the world of AI. I was and we learned a lot about measuring and then training out how to show empathy. And yeah, this disconnect was stark. 75% of agents saying empathy is their strongest skill, which I remember you saying, that's great. It's great agents have real confidence in it. Um, and actually what they wanted when we asked for what training they needed was stress and resilience training, which again, I think that's great self-awareness. But when
Mm,
we asked leaders, they said empathy and emotional intelligence is the most lacking skill. And yeah, 64% of all organizations don't prioritize that training. So that is a major, if you sort of triangulate this, you're going, okay, we're pretty sure that we're going to continue the trend of the reduction of the change of address, which was my favorite call,
yeah.
we take a breath, and I really think whether it's a chat or it's an SMS or whatever, or a call or email, whatever the channel, we all remember when you get an interaction, you're going, oh, this is an easy one, and you've got a target, and you think I can do this within the time, and I can get back a bit. We all know that emotion.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, and there are some great tools out there and that's the reminder to leaders really, which is And obviously I'm a vendor, but there are workforce management tools to help deal with agent stress levels and driving, a lot more autonomy. There are some amazing quality management tools where you can add AI to them now, and you can personalize your coaching in a way you never could before. So there's so much more you can do right now. And then there's careers that we talked about earlier. So it's in your control, but you've got to look at this gap between where your agents think they're strong and where you do.
Why do you think there is such a difference? Because you mentioned earlier the magic is in that delta often.
Yeah,
You've got within a team, right? So you've got the leader and you've got the people on the front lines, but believing that they are well, I'm great at empathy.
yeah,
Leaders, how good are they at empathy? Oh, it's one of their weakest skills.
yeah. I think it's the data you got available. Look at the data we've always had in contact centers, right? And we've, at the start of it, when ACDs turned up, we were all, doing handle time and counting contacts
Yeah.
and looking at queue data. And I'm not saying that contact centers don't, but it's been a good decade, probably longer, where contact centers have been saying, right, those are important metrics, but they're not our KPIs anymore. And when I was at CC Expo, the forum did an interesting thing where they were said they'd looked at what were the top statistics used in contact centers, and Contact Babel have come up with the same thing. And what they're saying is boards are generally looking at things like Net Promoter Score.
Mm,
And they are really hard to influence when you're a contact center
yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
often the brand. There are a lot of
Yeah.
things that happen outside that interaction. Whereas contact centers are often looking at the things they can control, and the top one's quality management. We know that from a planning perspective, it's going to be adherence, probably a lot. And they're looking at the and maybe CSAT, maybe complaints, but they're really looking at different things, and it's
Mm,
and it's contact centers being able to, when it comes to empathy, I think the first thing they should do is say, why is there a gap? Be curious. Have a look at your emotional and intelligence training. Have you got any? Because I did it in 2003. I was delivering emotional intelligence training. It's existed around for a long.
yeah. This is not a new thing.
No, it's absolutely not a new thing. And then look at the tools you've got, because you will have ability to. I'll give you an example of a Calabrio customer. They have they're almost at the tip of the trend. They're a crisis line in the UK, and I'm working with a cancer helpline in the US and a global employee assistance line that's dealing with basically doing mental health and
Mm,
debt and legal support for employees. All of these contact centers have one thing in common: a generally negative context.
mm,
So what we do pretty universally with them is using AI to identify extreme moments that agents or clinicians or who are dealing with. When they deal with too many extreme moments, we're flagging it, we're helping it out, we're making sure the team leaders have the coaching insight. And I think that will create that a closer relationship that's going to close that gap, where
mm.
leaders are looking at those moments where their agents need to show empathy or have empathy overload, and then are giving agents the tools, the coaching and the training to improve their empathy. That makes sense?
Uh, It does. I don't know about you, but even going through these results, I was thinking, oh, we need to ask this next year. We think,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like the follow-up question to
yeah,
that, rate your skills,
yeah,
which was a great question. The follow-up, I think, is, have you been trained in empathy?
yeah,
Because that would be fascinating to understand the stress having as much as an impact on uh, whether you stay within the organization industry or not as pay again is one where I think okay that's where we that's where we should focus because we've said earlier we've got a proud uh, group within we've got a proud strata that's going to be our future leaders, but we don't want them burn out if they're still here by the time they can move.
yeah. And it's about making connections for me. I think it's about looking at this data and look at your contact center and connecting. We'll give you an obvious example. You're going to get, if you're an operational leader, you're going to get pressure around AI. It's a guaranteed if it's not happening already.
Yeah.
Going to have projects pop up, and maybe out of IT, but it's going to be a lot of them are out of the C-suite because we're at a point where everyone has got a mandate to use it. And if I was a contact center manager, I'd want to have control over it. I rather than have that
Mm,
technology and the expectations pushed down upon me, I wanted to have control of it. So I think it's urgent that
mm,
organizations look at empathy as a skill set. It's generally misunderstood.
mm,
People think it's sympathy and they put it in a box of sympathy, and sometimes it's needed and sometimes it's not. It's needed on every conversation because
mm,
you can empathize with someone in a hurry. You can empathize with someone, obviously someone upset, but you can empathize with someone like my mum who causes handle time problems for every contact center. Waffle. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as you can see. But once you understand empathy is just like getting on someone's wavelength. It's vicariously experiencing their emotions and changing your behavior. You realize it's the tool we were all born with. We can apply to everything. And yeah, if you need systemic training, you can do that. If you need to
mm.
measure it, you can do that now with conversational AI. So it comes back to this point: is we've never been in such a good position
Yeah.
to do this. But contact centers do have to get on the front foot and start making these connections because otherwise they'll just have them done to them.
Well, one area that a bit of focus can help with agent stress is scheduling,
Yeah.
because within that is autonomy. What's the survey said about your favorite topic?
My favorite topic. We do love a bit of scheduling. So at
And
a
so
high
you
level,
should.
as we should, because I mean, the thing is, these are the things that really matter to people
Mm,
on the front line,
yeah.
right? Yes, there's some very, very cool, sexy real-time AI stuff that is going to matter to people on the front line because if executed well, could make their lives a bit easier. If executed badly, will really annoy agents. But let's talk about things we know they value. They value work-life balance. They value autonomy. They value the ability to move their shifts around, to bid for shifts. So the foundation again is good, right? 72% of agents understand why decisions are being made about their schedule. 78% of agents be able to take respite breaks. And again, that's one of these things, these behaviors is a foundation for the current and future of fewer
Mm.
ED contacts. 77% of agents saying PTO requests were generally taken. But you and I have chatted on this one several times, and we think that's still a great opportunity to be demanding and go higher.
Oh, for sure. Because I think you can aim for that being 100, because it's about communication.
Yeah,
It's about communicating consistently, because anyone who has spent any time in an operational contact center will know actually most of the gripes from the team are based around fairness.
yeah,
It's always, well, you got approved, Ed.
yeah,
I didn't.
yeah,
Well, okay. Am I likely? I might be the kind of person that says that regardless, but I'm less likely to say it if it's been explained to me.
yeah,
If we've got communication, and for all those small gaps, don't get me wrong, those percentages I thought were great, because it means that the WFM teams are getting it right,
yeah,
and they have happy customers.
yeah,
But I do think the gap again, that kind of delta, the delta is just saying keep communicating, keep
yeah,
communicating decisions.
absolutely. And but generally, we think the contact center industry should, if they're at that level, should feel like that's a good foundation. There is a question if you're seeing those data and going, that's nowhere near where I think my contact center is going to be, then that's a good call to action. But I think the more important one was around influencing schedules.
Mm,
Now, self-scheduling has been around for a long time. And yet, we still see organizations at our customer events who aren't using it. Often it's trust and control normally. I mean, it doesn't take too many times where an outlying team leader might be moving shifts around or updating schedule adherence KPIs to make their scores look better, to the planning team to kind of withdraw back into themselves, but it's the wrong thing to do. 50% of agents stated that they can influence schedule generation, and when we broke it down into who actually has control, it was around the same amount. So we had 38% saying the manager only controlled it. We had 3% saying the system only controlled it. We had around 40% saying the system, but I had influence. So this data said there's a great opportunity to speak to your vendor, whoever provides you workforce management. And if it's a spreadsheet, you still need to speak to a vendor and say, well, how can I do something where I can put in rules so I can control service levels and make sure our customers are having a great experience, but give our agents some autonomy, some flexibility, because there couldn't be more tools out there to manage it.
I found it fascinating when we were going through this. You said, you've been to events, client customer events as well, where the the functionality is there, but it's just not being enabled, and that
Yeah.
element of trust and control. Do you advise, if you have that ability, that it's possible to test it, to get there through kind of baby steps?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of one of my first lessons when, when AI came along in the form of speech analytics, there was a lot of fear of it was a policing tool. One of
Mm.
my favorite faux pas in my career was I was sat in the headquarters of a police service, and I had this objection. I said, well, no, it's not a policing tool. And they just looked at me. I went, all right, fair point. It would be if you bought it. But when
For
used,
you, it is.
yeah, but when used well, um, it isn't like that. When used well, agents were loving seeing a information on 100% of their conversations, not 1%.
Mm.
So, or seeing information based on the actual transcripts, not the customer's view from an NPS survey when they just were really fed up with the price they paid for the product in the first place, right? So what we did a lot of, some call them champion challenges, some call them test learn. It's an age old technique, but it's the right way to roll it out. And I am seeing some evidence that with the AI mania at the moment, people are going a bit crazy and rolling out too aggressively. And yeah, the way people roll out AI, is still the same. You've got to give it to a good team, but a typical team. That's how I used to do it. I'd say, give me a great team leader, but with a typical team, good,
Mm.
medium, poor performers, and then give them it a couple of weeks, daily stand-ups, talk to them. There's always going to be problems. It's software, and then get rid of the problems, then add one more team, make sure it can replicate itself in another environment with another team, and then obviously as this goes along, benchmark it against the rest of the floor and other locations, so you can, and then roll it out. And that's still, you can be quite aggressive as long as you use agile approaches and you're speaking to them every day. And it's that sort of mindset, and this is probably more to senior leaders you're working with. But if you're an operational manager and you're talking to your senior leaders about AI projects, demand this. Say this, let me
Yeah.
test it for you. Let me feedback for you, because that
Mm.
way you're going to get better AI projects.
Mm. And you spoke about the research at the recent contact center expo.
Yeah.
We've had a dinner where we discussed it. I just wondered, is the reaction to the research, has it been as you expected, or has there been any kind of interesting questions?
Yeah. The only stat I think needs more thought is the customer expectations staying the same versus managers saying they're getting more difficult.
Mm.
I just want to talk to more people about that,
Mm.
because it's neat, isn't it? You and I have both gone, well, normalizing stress, because that really happened to us.
Mm. Yeah.
It's almost like we've got a hypothesis that makes sense and we want to go out and prove it. So I would say that one, I'm not sure we got the final story there. On empathy, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that this is something every leader needs to be aware of.
Mm.
A gap between what leaders feel, what agents feel, what I see, because I analyze conversations all the time. Can I tell a brief
Yeah.
anecdote? I think I told you about my Apple experience, where Apple's customer experience is incredible, right? You just go on their website and you say, "Can I have a call, please?" And then within seconds you're talking to an agent. That's outstanding. And I had a memory issue, a storage issue on my phone. I had to completely rebuild my phone. It was time consuming, but and emotional because 33,000
Yeah.
photos. Of course, I need 33,000 photos, and please don't tell me about my carbon footprint of the photos of my children. But it's still quite emotional. And I spoke to an agent who was low energy, didn't inspire me with any confidence, and then just said quite rudely, "Can you speak up, please?" We didn't say please. Can you just said, "Can you speak up?" And in myself, I just said, "Look, I don't want to deal with you. And can you, I know this call's being recorded. Could you go speak to your team leader? Because I'd stated I'm really concerned about getting this wrong. I don't want to delete,
Yeah.
I want to delete all my photos. I know it was irrational, right? And then every agent preceding that and every agent I spoke to after that were brilliant. They completely knew the empathy context was this guy is technically competent, but frustrated he's having to do this. He's got to delete his whole phone and set every account up again. And it was that moment where this agent did not get that was the
Mm,
emotional context.
mm,
I was a slightly demanding, slightly emotional middle-aged man. Yes, I know the cap fits, wear it, right? But those moments just needed someone to say, "Don't worry, I've got this. I know exactly the process we're going to do. Not, can you speak up?"
yeah.
And it's moments like that. I think you've got to have a systemic way of analyzing it, of coaching on it. You've got to connect it to shifts and schedules because there's no doubt empathy goes down at end of shift. So that's where workforce management and quality management are going to come together. That's why I'm so excited because all this is
Mm.
now intermingling. We can now see every 15 minutes what the top topics of the conversations are. Use this. That's
It's a
amazing.
fascinating anecdote because you can't help but think, you know what? It's not you're an excellent judge of this, of course, but it isn't actually the statement, "Can you speak up?" Because if prior to that you felt you felt safe in the hands of this person who understood,
Yeah,
because we can all think, God, I would hate to lose all of my
yeah,
photos, of course. But and if there'd been a please on the end as well, but it's the whole call, and you do wonder. I was thinking, I wonder how that is going to be coached into that
yeah.
individual or coached with that individual afterwards. I think I've loved doing this research. I love what it's telling us,
Yeah,
and for me, probably even more so than last year, it's a clarion call to our industry around. You mentioned earlier this kind of the crucible, not just for AI,
yeah,
but where we are with pay, where
yeah,
we are with this engaged, proud group of individuals that we need to keep in our industry. There are some things that the report says, let's focus on these areas, or at the very least, let's explore in a bit more detail. You mentioned something earlier around using this report and looking at it in as a kind of how does this compare to my contact center?
yeah.
Where can people get the report?
Oh, I should have come prepared with that. Then get it on our website. Should we put up the QR code now? Would that be a good idea?
Great idea.
Yeah. Let me just
For
do.
those of you listening, I will put a link in the description of the podcast
Let me
because you
have.
won't be able to see the QR code, and
This is
they're
great
they're
radio.
impossible to.
Can you see the QR? So we will
I
make
can.
sure. Yeah, yeah. Podcast was a clue in the meeting invite, wasn't it? So yes, the URL is probably too long for me to read out for everyone. But if you
Yeah,
if
I
you
will
go to
put it in the
calabrio.com
description.
and search for Voice of the Agent, you will find it, and then we'll send it out with the podcast.
And it's worth noting we haven't gone through everything
No,
because this was such a comprehensive bit of research. And thank you to all of the organisations that took part. I think that alone is a good sign, right? That these were anonymous. This was an opportunity for agents. They knew it was going to a third party, so I like to think that they gave us unfiltered opinions, and we share the outcome in this. But we could go on for hours on this, and we have already,
Yeah,
not just
yeah,
not now, but we have
yeah.
done prior to this and on a webinar. And I think it's been just great to be able to do it with you and talk to you about it, Ed.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I just want to, whilst you might have heard some critique throughout the previous 55 minutes, if you're sat listening to this or watching this, you know, I am still so proud of the work I did when I was both leading and working in the front line in the contact center. And every day when I'm analyzing customer experiences, I feel proud of it. So
Mm,
it's a great set of data that's telling us there's brilliant foundations to work on, and we're at a point where instead of seeing it as we're going to be replaced by AI and all these challenges, I would think to myself, no, actually, these AI projects need us, and they've never needed us more to connect the amazing capabilities we've got now with the reality of what it's like dealing with groups of agents at scale, dealing with communication across channels at scale. And that needs some real smarts to do that. And contact center leaders are the right people to do it. So, yeah, loved it. Always loved talking to you. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, get in touch.
Ed, thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. Go and get the report.